What you are about to hear is 100% true. These events happened to me. This is my eyewitness account. If you believe in what can't be explained, stay with me. It was 1998, and the hallway had that particular kind of quiet that only exists in institutional buildings after midnight. Not peaceful, just holding its breath. A few of us had dragged blankets and pillows out of our rooms and planted ourselves on the floor in a loose circle, backs against the walls, legs stretched across the cheap industrial carpet. The light spilling in from a room further down was that weak orange burnt-out kind of glow, just enough to see faces, not enough to feel safe. There were 5 of us that night. Me, Betty, who was loud and sharp and had a laugh like a car alarm, impossible to ignore, even when you wanted to. Naomi, who was quieter, the kind of person who watched everything before she spoke, and her younger sister Ruth, who had followed Naomi into the program about 3 months after she arrived. Ruth was small, wiry, always fidgeting with the zipper on her hoodie. And then there was the girl we all called Maryland. That wasn't her name. I don't think anyone ever called her by her real name. She was just Maryland because that's where she was from, and in a place like that where everyone came from somewhere else, where you came from became who you were. We were all old characters in that place, the ones who'd been there the longest, who knew the rules, and which counsellors to avoid, and which bathroom stall had a working lock. That night, we were loud, not because anything was funny, but because we were all running from something. For me, it was my 18th birthday, sitting just a few days away like a ticking clock I couldn't reach. I didn't know what was going to happen when the calendar flipped. Would I age out? Would they send me somewhere else? The not knowing was worse than any answer could have been, so I laughed. We all did. Betty was telling some story about a counsellor who'd gotten her name wrong for 3 straight weeks. Maryland was doing impressions of him. Ruth was laughing so hard she kept snorting, which made Naomi roll her eyes, but smile in spite of herself. It was that kind of night, the kind where you almost forget where you are. And then, without anyone deciding, without anyone trailing off, the laughter just stopped. All at once, like a switch had been thrown. 5 voices, and then none. The silence that followed was wrong. It wasn't the comfortable pause between jokes. It was heavy. It pressed down on us. Ruth stopped fidgeting. Marilyn's face. I remember this so clearly. Went completely blank, like she was listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear yet. She was staring into the part of the hall where the overhead lights had been burned out all week. The dark part. The place none of us looked at if we could help it. And then it came. Not a creak, not footsteps, not anything human. A roar, massive, deep, primal, tore through that narrow space like it was ripping the air in half. It didn't sound like it was coming from somewhere down the hall. It sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. The floor vibrated. I felt it in my teeth. In my sternum. Naomi grabbed Ruth and pulled her in so hard, Ruth let out a small, choked sound. Not a scream. She was too scared to scream. Betty, who was never quiet, didn't make a sound at all. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. But in those seconds the temperature dropped. Not chilly, but like a door had opened onto somewhere cold. Somewhere that wasn't supposed to be there. When the roar cut off, nobody moved, nobody breathed. I remember looking at my own hands in my lap and thinking, if I don't move, if I am very still, it won't know I'm here. It was a child's thought, an animal's thought, but it was the only thought I had. Naomi had her arms locked around Ruth, her jaw clenched so tight the muscle was jumping in her cheek. Betty's eyes were huge, fixed on that dark stretch. Maryland was the first one to move, just her head, turning slowly, millimetre by millimetre. I watched her do it and I remember thinking she was the bravest person I had ever met. Nothing was there, just the dark, just the burned out bulbs and the closed doors and the cheap carpet. Nothing. Heavy footsteps. Amber, the head counsellor, came storming out of her room at the far end. Late 20s. All business. The kind who believed in rules and consequences and nothing else. She wanted to know what we were doing, what that noise was, why we were all sitting in the hallway in the middle of the night, looking like we'd seen something. She didn't believe us. Of course she didn't. But I saw her hand shake a little as she lifted her flashlight. She swept the beam down the hallway, the linen closet, the bathroom door, every corner. Nothing. Then she hit the master switch and the whole place flooded with harsh, clinical light, the kind that makes everything look ugly and ordinary and safe. Empty. Completely empty. We checked the back door. The handle turned. Unlocked. Not hanging open, but the latch was free. We'd been sitting right there the entire night. 5 people, directly in the path between that door and the rest of the building. Nobody had walked in. Nobody had walked out. Amber told us to go to bed. It was past 11, way past lights out, and she was trying to restore order. But none of us moved toward our rooms. Instead, all 5 of us crowded into her office. Her room was big, plenty of space for all of us, and we sat there still shaking, trying to put words to something that had no words. We were all talking at once, fragments spilling out. It sounded like... I felt it in my... It was so cold. None of us could finish a sentence. We were trying to get it out of our systems, and failing. Then the doorknob started to rattle. Not a small rattle, violent, like someone on the other side was yanking at it, trying to force their way in. Everyone froze. Amber stood up, staring at the door. There was nobody there. She opened it. The corridor was empty, and then the windows began to shake. The glass was vibrating so hard against the panes it sounded like it was about to crack. The floor rumbled beneath us, deep and low, like a freight train passing directly under the building. It felt like an earthquake, but it wasn't an earthquake. We all rushed to the window, pushing past each other, expecting to see a storm, a gale, trees bending sideways. Nothing. The night outside was dead still. Not a single leaf moving. No wind. No weather. Nothing. Yet the glass kept shaking against our fingertips. Amber picked up the phone and called the male dormitory. She asked for Johnny, the men's counsellor, and told him to bring a few boys and search the area. About 15 minutes later, 5 of them arrived with flashlights. We watched from the window as they fanned out across the grounds, beams cutting through the dark, checking bushes, corners, the fence line, back and forth, thorough. They found nothing, not a footprint, not a broken branch, not a single thing out of place. Johnny radioed back to Amber. All clear, nothing to report. Eventually Amber sent us to our beds. I lay there with the covers pulled up to my chin, listening to the hum of the air conditioning, waiting for it to happen again. It never did, but for weeks after, every time I walked past that stretch of hallway, I walked faster. Every time the lights flickered, my stomach dropped, and I never, not once, sat in that corridor after dark again.
If these stories found you, maybe they were meant to. Like and subscribe for more. There are things I've seen that I haven't told you yet.